Déjame si no solo cierro la ventana y creo que eso va a ayudar.
Sí, buenísimo. Sí, ciérralo.
Sí, qué cañón. No. Sí.
Mm,
Otra vez no se no estaba, pero ahorita sí lo estoy escuchando bastante.
no te apures. Porque si está el ruido, digo, no, ningún estrés, lo volvemos a mover, porque si no, sí se va a escuchar. Espérame. Sí lo escucho.
¿Sí? A ver si ya paró.
A ver, espérame. Bueno, espero que ahora sí todo
Sí.
esté bien con esta conexión. Ah, ok,
Buenísimo.
buenísimo. Hello, joining me in studio today is Lenny Peterson from Mexico City. She is the founder and CEO from Celeste. Hello, Lenny, how are you?
Hi, Sol. Wonderful to see you and excited to be calling you from Mexico City.
Yes, my homeland, Mexico lindo. So
Excited,
nice
excited.
to have you on the.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We would like to start on what is your solution? Like, what are you building? What are you focused on today? And who do you really serve?
Those are terrific questions, Sol, and thank you so much for inviting me. Super excited to be able to chat with you and tell you a little bit more about my story and Celeste's story. I'm building Celeste, and Celeste is a water fintech. We're building in the
Mhm.
intersection of water, finance, and AI. And basically, what we're trying to solve is that many times corporates are struggling to build a business case to invest in water. They understand that right now they're seeing more and more disruptions in water. They're seeing plant shutdowns, slowdowns, production stops, all because of water scarcity and also flooding. So they
Mhm.
understand it's quite strategic, but at the same time they don't have the financial language to justify it. They're old excels. It's hard to say, like, how do you input water risk into an excel to justify an investment? So what we're doing
Yes.
is that we're translating risk and turning it into financial language so that corporates are
Mhm.
able to mobilize and justify these investments. That's the first portion of what we do. And the second
Mhm.
portion of what we do is help corporates actually invest together. We're a financial platform where multiple companies can invest together to that way make larger investments. And this could be, let's say, a desalination plant, a wastewater treatment plant, or nature-based solutions like basin restoration. And so that way
Mhm.
we're leading to much greater resilience and much more capital being moved together. And so we're reducing the tragedy of the commons where no one company or perhaps even the government wants to invest. But if you can pool
Mhm.
capital together, then everyone is like, actually, this is affecting me, and I would love to invest with other folks, not doing it by myself. So that's a
Yeah.
little bit about what we're doing. It's a different way of
Yeah.
seeing the water crisis. For sure.
Yes, it's like having the water as a financial variable. That
Exactly.
it's something new in the P&L, or can you put it in the P&L?
That's exactly what we're trying to do is to be able to show how water is affecting the bottom line. And so by making it financial, sustainability teams, we're basically a translator. We help sustainability teams have better conversations with their finance, with their CFO, CEOs, and to say, hey, like, if we don't do this it could cost us, let's say, $20 million just in this plant, just in this region. And so if we're
Mm.
thinking about doing a $500,000 investment or $1 million investment, it makes a lot of sense just to be able to reduce the potential risks that could come from closing down our plant due to water scarcity.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mm. Super interesting. And is there anything exciting, milestone or breakthrough that has happened recently that feels important to share?
For sure, and I also realized I didn't answer your second question about who do we serve, but
Yeah,
to
who are
answer your
you, sir?
question, for sure. So we're starting first with food, beverage, and textiles, because
Mm-hmm.
those companies are the ones that have set these Fortune 500s are companies that have set public water goals the earliest, and so I mean you need water to grow cotton, and you need water to grow, of course, grow sugar, but also within production. Let's say for the dyeing process, or if you see a bottle of soda, a lot of it, if it's liquid, then of course it uses water. Although we're starting to see a lot of interest also from oil and gas and manufacturing, big tech, with all the data centers that they use a lot of
Mm-hmm.
water. And many times we speak to sustainability managers or water. Sometimes there's even water leads within sustainability, but those are many times the champions, and decision makers tend to be finance. So it tends to be a problem that touches many aspects and many parts of a company, but we are targeting these like
Mm.
large food, beverage, and textiles to start.
Yes. And how long have you had your company up and running?
For sure, it's been 2 years, but it's been like 7 months since we pivoted more into the finance space. As you know, any good startup, it's just being able to find what is actually, and I love to see problems as system problems, especially something like water, and to be able to find the leverage point that is going to have the greatest amount of impact is it was really important. And I can talk a little bit further about the journey of getting to where we are today. But I think
Yeah.
we're in a really exciting tipping point right now where one, more and more corporates are seeing that this is no longer an ESG line item, but actually a really key strategic investment that they should be making. We're also seeing a lot more like public water goals being set. And so right now it's an exciting time. And then for Celeste, the fact that we pivoted into a more like this combination of finance and water has been
Mm.
super exciting for corporates. It's like, yes, help us just justify and all of these projects that are getting paused, help us justify them and then manage them in a much more transparent and data driven manner. It's uh, something that isn't in Excel and something a lot more robust that is learning with AI. And in an
Mm.
exciting turn of events, we publicly just won recently the InnoDrop initiative, and it's basically three corporates that we can mention: AB InBev, Grupo Herdes, and Grupo Niagara. The three of them, it's basically like three corporates that
Mm.
like to work with startups, and so above 100 different startups we won. And instead of giving you a cash prize, what they do is that you win a pilot with
Yeah.
them. And so that was really exciting to be excelling in the water space. We've also recently done some really interesting panels with what's it called, the ex or one of the ex directors of the OECD, who was also the man who
Mm.
negotiated the Paris Agreement for Mexico. We were part of a
Mm.
panel with them and Danone, and so we've been very visible right now, even for an early stage startup. So it's exciting
Yeah.
that Celeste is making some waves right now.
Yes. Very exciting. Congratulations. Really
Thank you
cool.
so much. Thank you.
And this venture, or is it like a venture program? What you want, like being working with these big corporates, and you will have a certain period that you can kind of lean on them in a way.
Exactly. So it's an interesting like multi-stakeholder program where you also have Conagua, which is
Mm.
basically the department that deals with water in Mexico, and you have these three corporates, and you also have a university, and their whole purpose is how do we bring together more corporates and startups together. It's not venture that they're not. I mean, they do provide mentorship, and it's fantastic. Really recommend to folks based in Latin America to apply to it. It's very similar to the 100 plus program that is worldwide that also brings corporates
Mm.
and startups together. They do provide some mentorship, but the biggest thing is that you get a pilot with these companies. It's like an easier form of sales, and they're a lot more flexible as you continue building the platform. So it's a great place to be, receiving feedback, and it's the first time that
Mhm.
three corporates are excited about the same solution,
Yes.
the financial platform, and they're excited about the idea of co-investing together for like larger resilience in both their operations and their supply chain.
Yeah. And for you to prove success and keep them growing.
Exactly. And with three large corporates, and at the same time, and so, and again, testing this aspect of the platform of co-investment is super important for us.
Hmm, very good. Congrats.
Thank you.
And with regards to your future footprint, I always like to look a bit ahead. Like when
Mm.
you think about years in the future, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave?
For sure, I think I would like to leave multiple legacies, and when I always see the impact that we're having, it's always like both internal and external. Some very direct, some indirect. Everything from being a female Latin founder from Mexico. Like I would love to encourage more founders from Mexico, more female founders overall. Like it's sometimes a bit sad when I'm in spaces and I'm the only woman, or only a handful. And so to tell more women that you can do this, it's to take more risks. I think sometimes many women are taught to be quite perfect, and being in a startup is the opposite of being perfect. You just always have to be iterating and growing. You never reach that perfect state, and taking more of a risk. I think so. The first one is, yeah, female founder. More this idea that a lot of great startups, that the ecosystem in Mexico and Latin America is super robust. I studied many years in the U.S., and I'm happy to tell a little bit more of that story. But I decided to come back from the States and come back to Mexico after 8 years, because I realized like the ecosystem was growing. It was super exciting. The number of problems and also a support. I said like there's no better place, not the Bay Area, no, not New York or Boston, but actually Mexico City. I thought would be really exciting, and I'm very passionate about helping grow that ecosystem. And then more directly in water, I think I love when I can give corporates that language and that we can see a lot more capital moving into this space. Historically, water has been seen as just a philanthropic issue, like, oh, I'm going to give these populations access to water, and that's incredibly powerful. I don't want to diminish that, but if I can show the business case of investing in water, and I think that's incredibly powerful. I also want to be able to, as we're mobilizing more capital into this space, especially if we can lean more into nature-based solutions, seeing this idea of like of companies moving together to co-invest is so powerful. We're seeing it in a manual manner, like companies coming together and just saying like, hey, this is so large, it doesn't make sense for any of us to do it by ourselves. And the fact that this is already happening, there's some great examples happening in Mexico. We see some in Turkey, we see some in India, and so we're seeing it more and more. And the idea that if Celeste can facilitate it through a financial platform, I think is incredibly powerful and reducing the tragedy of the commons. If we can do it in water, perhaps we can do it in other sustainability issues too. This idea that not one stakeholder can do it by themselves, not one corporate could do it by themselves. So there's uh, probably I answered it in a variety of ways, but both very direct and sometimes indirect effects that we want to have through Celeste.
Yeah, you as a female founder and as an organization, I think it's fantastic what you're doing to represent women in our country, and also as an organization to give an element so vital that kind of we needed to survive, a voice, and a voice that could be valued. And maybe that's what we need to understand, the value of water that we have kind of uh, taken for granted in a way.
No, for sure. You're hitting the nail on the head. It's all about the value of water, and it's interesting that we don't see it until it's gone, because it's so cheap. In many countries, water is heavily subsidized, and so people say like, "Oh, it falls from the sky," or "I can just easily open my tap and it's always there." But the moment that it isn't there, you realize. I mean, in Mexico City last year, there was a really big drought, and a lot of the water systems were quite low, and it hit Mexico City in a way that I myself had my running water cut, at periods at a time, like hours, sometimes days. I would just buy bottled water for drinking, so there wasn't any, like, I knew I was going to survive. But you suddenly realize that, hey, I can't clean the dishes whenever I want, or I can't shower whenever I want, and I can't flush the toilet. Very quickly your quality of life diminishes drastically when you don't have access to clean water. And it's what I thought was crazy is that it's not somewhere far away. It was in the capital city of the 14th world economy. Like it's something that's happening right now. Something similar happened to Cape Town. We're seeing something similar happen right now in Tehran, in Iran. So we're seeing it happen more and more in multiple cities that are not close by. It's something that's reverberating. But with this value of water, you realize like it's everywhere. Like all our products, you know, textiles, our computer, the table that we're touching right now, even, you know, when you think about ChatGPT and the amount of water that they use, or like just AI tools that they use, you realize that all digital and physical products have a water footprint, and without water we wouldn't be able to produce them. So I think folks understand the value of water for life, but
Hmm.
they forget the value of water for our economy and for
Yeah.
our you know, the
Yeah.
products that we use.
Yes. Amazing. And if we rewind a little
Mm.
bit to what's like to start this journey, how was it? Where were you? What happened in your world?
For sure. I think I would love to cover a little bit of, because it was a small, like, you know, you take multiple steps, and hindsight is 2020. Like you only, when you look back, you realize like, wow, everything was connected. But for me, I
Mm.
always knew I wanted to work somewhere in impact, like to build something that would have a big impact. My theory of change, I'll tell the story of of how my theory of change went evolving to get to the point where I wanted to build a startup. And not only that, I wanted to build in water, and then where Celeste is today. And so at first I thought I wanted to build a physical product. You know, I encountered products like the Hippo roller, where you could, funny enough, it was also around water. You could push you know, 4 times the amount of water. Instead of carrying it in your back, you would just be able
Yeah.
to push it as a cylinder, or mosquito nets, or an odon device that would help what's it called, with birthing. And so I realized like, wow, physical products and good design can have a huge impact on people's lives, and save you know, you know, both in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of social impact. And so I ended up studying mechanical engineering at Stanford,
Mm.
and this idea of like building something physical. But while I was at Stanford, I joined a startup called Mawa Modular. And I was under one of the greatest mentors that I've had, and a woman that I truly admire. And again, back to that idea of representation, this woman, Dr. Bushra Bataineh, is a fantastic person that inspired me both as a friend and a mentor. We were designing refugee homes for Syrians in Jordan, and this idea again of a physical product, how it can, you know, impact the lives of so many people.
Mm.
And we created a modular shelter that could, you know, if a piece broke, you don't have to replace a full shelter. You could just replace that piece, and it could be easily moved in case, you know, the crisis were to end. And so that's where I realized like, wow, it's not only a physical product, but perhaps a startup that could be really interesting. And I fell in love with that idea, and so my theory of change went evolving into this idea of a startup. From there, I did some work in future focused design and innovation. This idea of like steeple research, which is what are trends in society, technology, economics, politics, environment. And if you see that, it made me fall in love with the future, and this idea that what is a problem that is huge today that is only going to
Mm.
continue to grow in importance. And so water is such a perfect example of that. And I all the problems that I was writing, and I was finding, because for me it's all about getting obsessed with the problem and not the solution. All the
Yeah.
problems that I had a running list of problems that I care deeply about. They were all big today, and but something that would only continue to grow in importance, and water is one of those that was perfect. And so I was in consulting, but I realized like, wow, I really want to actually build a startup. In that moment I felt quite technical, but perhaps not as like, I didn't have as deep of a business acumen. And I think
Mm.
you can go back and forth. Perhaps I could have just gone direct and been a founder. I think as a woman, sometimes you feel like you need more degrees and more little shiny stars. I would tell women listening to this, or just folks who need it. I think sometimes you can just jump right ahead and try. I do not
Mm.
regret it. I was very happy. I did a dual master's in Harvard, a master's in engineering that I focused in hydrology and climate tech, and an MBA. I'm the first person
Mm.
from Mexico to do this dual masters,
Yeah.
woman or man. Um, and I learned a lot about climate tech. I met some fantastic folks, so I don't regret it at all. I think just the motivation for it, that I was like, oh, I need more shiny degrees, I think was in the right one. Although I'm so happy that I went, and the people that I met, the tools that I got, and it's a very like entrepreneurship focused program. So I was really really happy to get to that program. But I can go then deeper a little bit to how I got into Celeste, but I don't know if this is the
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
amazing, wonderful. And I would like to highlight two amazing professors, Professor Brian Trelsted, who taught me a lot about systems thinking, and how it's all about seeing system like problems as opposed to just like one problem, one user. In how I learned perhaps in undergrad in a very design thinking manner, I think evolving to more of a systems thinking, where there's
Mm.
you have all of these feedback loops. And there's something like water, you start writing, and I've been drawing so many different maps to understand the problem. There's everything from like, hey, aging infrastructure, and of course climate change. They say that if
Yeah.
if climate change is a shark, water is its teeth. And of course you
Mm.
have rising populations, and greater demand, and then of course like water quality, and how we have a decline in water quality, and microplastics. And there was just so many problems, like so many stakeholders, and so many problems touching this idea of like we don't have enough water to be able to use. And so I was like, uh, it's just a fantastic class that really helped me see problems in this way. And another one was Professor Chris Ferreira, who taught me a lot about supply chains, and thinking about, again, delays, and how like how do we think about disruption in supply chains, and how there might be specific nodes that if you hit, how they have different cascading effects. And
Mm.
just seeing everything like a system of pressures, that if you hit one, and how it moves within the system. And so I think it was just a series of lessons that taught me, I think, how to think about problems, and how to think about possible solutions, and find these leverage points. And that's
Mm.
how I got to, okay, I want to be a founder. My theory of change had evolved. I know how to think about problems in the right way. And I actually, as I said, I was starting to write a list. And funny enough, I had written about water to get into Stanford. And it was one of those problems that was top of the list. And I remember, for in the class of that I had with Professor Brian Trelsted, um, he said you should study a startup that you think you're interested in the industry, to then maybe perhaps jumping into that industry.
Yeah.
And I had studied a startup called Isla Urbana in Mexico City, which is fantastic. They do a lot of rainwater capture. And but I realized like there wasn't enough that many water startups. I mean, now that I know and I'm in the space, there's actually, it's a quite
Mm.
robust ecosystem. But comparing it to energy and emissions, like there's so much focus on energy and emissions, and so little focus on water. And the more I studied it, the more I fell in love, because it's super social, it's super
Yeah.
environmental. It's everything from like who has water access, wash and sanitation, and how like I felt it firsthand, how it can change your quality of life so quickly. But then super economic and financial, and everything from like economic development and opportunity is tied to water, and supply chains are deeply tied to water. So I was like, this is the more I read, the more I fell in love, and I felt like I had
Yeah.
found my ikigai. And that ikigai, where it's like, I feel like I can build a business around here. It can have deep impact, and I think I'm really good at thinking of these like high level system problems, and,
Mm.
and grounding it. So that's a little bit about how I got into water.
Yeah.
I built Celeste, and Celeste comes from the word sky in Latin,
Yeah.
or and I love that it can be translated to multiple languages. In Spanish, celeste; in English, celeste; in Portuguese, celeste.
Mm.
And this idea that when we started interviewing, at first I just interviewed so many folks, from farmers to people who took care of dams, to
Mm.
sustainability folks, just to understand the problem. And everyone spoke about this idea of, when they didn't have access, or when they didn't have control, they would pray to a higher being, pray to the sky,
Yeah.
pray to something bigger. And so I like this
Mm.
idea of like something bigger. And I also wanted a startup where the sky was the limit. And so
Yeah.
Celeste was born. And the journey of Celeste has been a hard one, a very rewarding one. It's been
Mm.
one of multiple pivots as a mechanical engineer. I started with hardware, and let's find where there's leaks, and that's a great way. But I realized like that's not actually going to change the large problem. Um, um, there's demand and supply, and there wasn't enough happening in the supply side. And so we went from a hardware, a lot of like inside of operations. Then I realized that 90% of water is embedded in the supply chain, and so the majority of water is external to people's operations. So I was like, oh, maybe a supply chain tool.
Yeah.
And then from there I realized, like, of course, like being able to engage with our suppliers was great, but then I realized this idea of like co-investment of I found the case of Charco Bendito, where like 12 different competitors, everything from like Coca-Cola, Nestle, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Danone, Bimbo at the time, and multiple other companies made a co-investment together. And that was the spark. That was I love this. Like, if there's companies coming together, how can we actually have, instead of a dozen examples, how do we have hundreds or thousands of them? And instead of 12
Mm.
companies, can we actually have 50 or 100 or more companies co-investing together, either partner companies like peers, or peers with their suppliers, competitors, and companies within and between different industries. And so this idea became a bit of an obsession, this
Yeah.
idea of like scaling what in the water space they call collective action.
Mm.
And so we started as a project management tool. We realized there wasn't enough value, and then we ended up as a financial tool. And it's been fantastic, like being a financial tool, trying to encourage more companies to get to co-investment, to build that business case,
Mm.
and then being the financial platform that manages them is actually a really positive flywheel, because you get more companies to invest, and then you're actually managing them. You get more of the business case, more data, to then encourage more companies to come in. And so it's this combination of both, and where I am today, that I truly think we can actually make a large dent, to build a very successful startup, because we have the appetite of being a unicorn, but
Mm.
also one that can push and create so much impact, not only in Latin America, but in Europe, in Asia, and beyond. So it's a little bit. I'm sorry, that was a quite a
Oh, wow.
story,
That's, no,
but
I love it. And I love the vision, or this of almost falling in love with the problem and getting
Mhm,
so obsessed that the the whole awareness, or this whole kind of ride you had, from studying to kind of testing different ways of doing it, when the common denominator was water.
uh-huh,
uh, the answer was quantify it, like make it, yeah, easy to value, because how do you, yeah, how do you quantify water?
mhm,
It's with the level of infrastructure you have, with the amount you have, with the access you have,
mhm, mhm,
but it's kind of beyond that. Like, you maybe are flashing the light to places that nobody ever have looked. And that's why I guess a lot of companies are kind of turning around and saying, yeah, we're getting slow here in the game, so we need to collaborate. And I think that's the way we need to operate in the future. um, Period.
yeah,
Collaboration, partnerships, moving forward. So I really, I'm so excited when I hear your stories, and it's all very, um, yeah, standing in your purpose. That it's really, yeah, super interesting to see and powerful to follow.
thank
And
you.
has there been any kind of big surprise, or there's been something like a challenge, or something that was kind of like, took you out of, you know
The comfort zone.
out of
No,
the
for sure. For sure. This has been probably the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Much harder than, no engineering degree, no double masters. I really think it's been the hardest, but also one of the most fulfilling.
Mm,
And so many learnings. And I think I think it's like been the best school. I mean, I love school, and as you can see it in my background, and I would not
Yeah.
regret it. And I loved, if folks are ever considering, studying engineering or going to an MBA, like I really, really encourage that, especially we need more women. Um, but I do think this has been the hardest thing. And it's for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a solo founder. For me, it was all about not rushing to just get someone, and because they always tell you you can start one of two ways. You either start by finding a problem and getting obsessed and growing, and then finding someone that's a great fit, or
Mm.
you already know someone that you work really well. And a lot of my friends, I couldn't encourage them because it takes a specific risk profile to be able to jump into a startup. And there's people that I work really well with that perhaps didn't have that appetite, maybe to join a startup and not to found it. And so being a
Mm.
solo founder in a space that is really, really hard, like I have so many peers from Stanford and Harvard, that are founders themselves and are doing fantastic work. But if you're doing something like back end accounting, it's so easy to describe to VCs. They understand it. It's a very contained problem. And I chose, I think, one of the hardest problems, one of the most fulfilling, and I think one of the greatest opportunities. And I can put this, like, I'm very happy to state this. I do think that the best opportunities in this coming decade are system problems. They're harder problems to get to, but if you have the resilience and the appetite to understand them, there's great
Mm.
opportunities there. But I think I chose a very hard problem. I did it by myself for a big chunk of time. I mean, now I have a fantastic team that I love, but I'm still
Mm.
a solo founder, and it means that you're being pulled in so many directions, that I need to go from fundraising to trying to close sales, to try to understand product, to try to hire talent. And it's just, I have never been so challenged, but at the same time, I've never learned so much in these past couple of years. It's been a fantastic journey. Um, and um, and and some of the concrete challenges have been like fundraising. For example, fundraising in a problem where VCs, there's some great water VCs. They tend to be a little bit later stage, like in the seed stage. So if you're just starting and you're like, hey, I'm looking for capital, it's hard because a lot of climate VCs don't have, they say like, oh, our main focus is carbon or energy, like water. We're starting to see a change, and so I think this is an exciting time. We're also seeing, of course, more ocean focused VCs interested in water on land, and so there's
Yeah.
more interest. But I will say that, when we tried raising our first round, and this was before we were a financial tool, it was quite hard, and a lot of education to folks, and they're like, oh, that's such a niche problem. I'm like, it's the opposite of niche. It's huge. It touches so
Yeah,
much.
it's universal.
It's
Yeah.
universal. And so receiving a lot of no's, also because of everything that happened with Trump and tariffs. One of the companies that we were looking at, that we've been working for, to close for a year, suddenly they received so many tariffs that they went into financial duress, and they weren't able to. Suddenly the project got paused indefinitely,
Yeah.
and that was so hard. So it's like there's been, so many hits where you're like, no, I have to keep going. And because I truly fell in love with the problem. And for folks who are, thinking of being founders, you really have to choose something that you care about. You really have to choose something that, I think it's a combination that you really care about it, and profound discipline. It's not about motivation.
Yeah.
My motivation comes and goes, but I always say, like, I'm going to wake up at this hour and I start working at this hour, and I have that structure so that even if it's been a really bad day, I'm like, well, this is just what I do. I keep,
Yeah.
moving forward. But I think, yeah, fundraising in such a tough space. Now that we're more
Mm.
financial, I think VCs get a lot more excited about that. I think before, when we were more like project management or in our previous iterations, people just expected us to be, a hardware solution for leaks, which is where I started at the very beginning. But with more
Yeah.
understanding, you can see the problem in a clearer way. But I understand where folks don't are not thinking about water as much as I am. So that was
Mm.
a big challenge. And many times where I'm like, "Oh, I'm just gonna throw the towel," and or sorry, that's a very Spanish saying. I'm just gonna, uh,
Tirar la toalla.
tirar la toalla, as they say, and not continue. But I think I'm like, I have all these fancy degrees. I want to do something that actually makes a change. I love this problem, and I think it's been surrounding myself by a network of people that truly support,
Yeah.
who have the highest regard for other water stewards, and so I know I know that I just have to hold on, and now I've held on enough that we're really taking off and it's really paid off. But I can tell folks that
Mm.
it's not an easy journey. It's being a founder. You won't learn, like, it's the best school, and it's the most fulfilling, like the conversations I have, like I get approached by people, everything from like large multinationals to government to nonprofits with crazy names, because they're like, wow, you're working on this and this is super exciting. And I think if I was just wanting to do impact maybe within a corporate, not to minimize, I think it would take many many years for me perhaps to get to that level of conversations and impact. And so
Yeah.
it's been very very fulfilling. But sorry, I think you ask
No, no,
a
but
quick
it's
question
perfect.
and then I give you
Over.
8 hours of response.
Don't worry, it's perfect. It just will be in the content, and it's really relevant. And with regards those early days and
Hmm.
your door openers in that stage, who believed in you? That you would like to kind of highlight specific partners or customers or mentor that opened the doors in those days?
For
Feel
sure,
free
I
to
think it's
name
been
drop.
oh, sorry, I think you broke off a little bit. Sorry if I interrupted you. I think there's been a variety of
Are you
people that
there?
have.
No?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I hear you perfectly.
Perfect, wonderful.
Do
Um,
you?
uh, I
Yeah.
can hear you perfectly. So for your question on like the mentors that or the people that open doors, I think there's been a variety of people. I mean, first, starting with Dr. Bushra Batainek, who gave me. I was a sophomore in college, and the other people that were working on this were like doctorates, and so at the beginning, just being like given a that my voice matters, that my ideas were really interesting, and that I could believe in myself. Like I think that was she was one of the first openers, not directly in Celeste, but just overall to believe in myself. And so much is gaining the confidence to be able to jump in and do this. I think that was one of the first. I would say that one of our I had a couple great advisors. There was one person from HBS who graduated with me. She couldn't jump into the startup, but she stayed as an advisor, Taryn Stamper. And I think just having someone to build at the beginning and not be fully alone, even if it's just an advisor, and I talk to her like a couple of times a week, just having that sanity check
Mhm.
was so powerful. And so I think just having someone that um, you know, is like, hey, you're going in the right direction, and this is right. I think also my parents, like I spoke to them, and I was a little bit scared when you're like, she graduated from Harvard, and at first I thought, oh, I'm going to tell them I'm going to be working on water, and I don't know how they're going to take that. And I think that the fact that they supported me and they're like, that's amazing, it's such a cool problem.
Yeah.
And even they said, oh, your grandfather used to work in topics around water. And I think just acknowledging it and supporting as opposed to maybe dissuading was so powerful.
Mhm.
um, um, and then from there, we had an early advisor, Ashwin Kak, who was the ex head of sustainable procurement in AB InBev India. And we got connected through the HBS network. And the fact that he was really excited and took so many of our calls, because you obviously talk to a lot of potential customers, but someone that you can recurringly just bounce ideas and say, hey, we're
Yeah.
building this platform. And he saw the evolution of our platform. And he also was very although he's based in India, he's very connected to the German startup ecosystem, and so he knows a
Mhm.
lot about how to support startups. And so that was really really fantastic receiving his help. Another person has been Colin Heron. He's also from the water space and has been so kind at answering so many of our questions. And so I think we've just found also the folks at WWF have just been so kind at answering our questions, at understanding, hey, what is needed. Also, the folks at Charco Bendito, I've pinged different folks, and just to understand this idea of like co-investment. And so
Yeah.
it's a variety of folks that were kind enough to speak to us. And there's some other folks, but right now we're under NDA, and so it would be
Yeah, yeah, of course.
hard for me to I guess I can
Of
mention one other, and just as a mentor, and just seeing her and her path, a woman in the water space, Ana Marquez, from Coca-Cola, has also in Latin America, has she's been fantastic, and I was able to learn so much from her, just
Mm.
as a friend and mentor. And so really, and Paul Bowen, also from Coca-Cola, ex head of water in Coca-Cola. So some
Mm.
great folks in the space, that have been guiding us. And so really excited, and you need to find these early believers. You need to find these folks that, you'll think you're crazy, because many times, like, many, I don't know, investors will say you're crazy, or if you get customers that aren't the right fits, and they're not, because you have to be very selective with who you talk to. They might say, like, no, we don't need this, and then you'll think you're going crazy, and you said, like, all this work, and then it's not working. And then I'll also
Yeah.
say that one big learning was, sales is research. Many times we spoke to people and they would give us all their pain points, and then you build it and then nobody wants to buy it, because people will tell you their problems, but it doesn't mean that they are willing to pay for it. And so now we've changed our whole sales process, to be able to, you really say, like, are you, like, do you have a budget for this, or are you thinking about this actively right now? Because if not, you will build a lot of things that people think are really cool, but they don't have the money, or they have so many problems that it's not in their top, five problems to be solving.
Yeah.
So I think
Mm.
really surrounding yourself with advisors, and another woman, Montserrat Ocaña, who's also a deep expert of water policy in Harvard, has been fantastic. So I can keep on naming people, because
Yeah, big list. That's
it's been a
amazing.
village. It's been a village
Yes,
of
you're
people.
surrounded,
Exactly. Even
and
if I've been
that's so good.
yeah,
That's
even if you're
really
a solo
really
founder,
good.
you have to
Mm.
find that network.
And moving into your scaling
Mm,
vision, like
hmm.
thinking momentum,
For sure.
if when everything is aligned, who are your ideal partners, customers, and investors that you would love to have on board in your next kind of stage to help you accelerate? Who would those be?
For sure. I mean, right now we have a combination of folks, everything, what's it called? Everything from, like, climate, to, like, climate VCs. We also have some angels in, like, big tech, because they're realizing that that's huge, and someone also in oil and gas. What's it called? And sorry, let me just search one one element that I wanted to cover. And sorry, I know I know that this might be edited, but I just want to make sure that, uh, yes. But who I wanted is, like, right now we have a big continuum of, like, climate folks, and we want to continue doing that, especially as we go getting a little more robust. Eventually, getting some specific water people on our cap table would be fantastic.
Mm.
Eventually, we want to have more finance and fintech, because I
Yeah.
think we are in the intersection of both, and we are a fintech, just to focus on water. And we've actually found that if we position ourselves as a financial tool, both for corporates, like sustainability managers really like when we describe ourselves as a finance tool, because then they can speak to their CFO and say, like, hey, this finance was really helpful for us in sustainability. But I think leaning and getting more investors who do a lot of either climate finance or just fintech, to be able to, because in the end of the day, great investors, and one of our another early believer was our the person who led our previous round, Karen Sheffield, from Pachamama Ventures. She was also, like, a really, really early believer. I think, being able to lean a little bit more fintech and finance in our next round is going to help us, because a good investor will connect you to, potential customers, but also other investors, and also give you advice. And if their portfolio of founders is a lot of finance folks, then you can always say, hey, you're building a very similar tool, but in a very different space. You learn so much from each other. You learn so much from your
Yeah.
peers. And I would say that one of the
Mm.
greatest resources that sometimes founders tend to forget is just other founders. They're the folks who
Yeah.
many times introduce you to other investors, who can introduce you to customers, who can help you find client. I mean, even talent. Like, sometimes I'm, between two great people, and in the end of the day, I can only choose one. But there was this other great profile, and sometimes I tell people, like, hey, is anyone looking for this kind of engineer, or
Mm.
XYZ. But to answer your question concretely, I think on the investor side, obviously more climate is always great, particularly folks who are interested in water and climate adaptation, which now there's a great move, climate finance and fintech. Then on the customer side, like always more introductions to food, beverage, and textiles, like companies who have signed the CEO water mandates. Is 600 companies who have publicly said water is important to us, but now we're
Yeah.
trying to get more connections into oil and gas, big tech, manufacturing, because if we can help these large corporates, particularly something like oil and gas, that maybe if we can help them reduce their impact in water, that's a huge win for the world. And so those would
Yeah.
be great, great introductions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And what is your biggest hurdle today? And how do you think Tool or our global female founders community support you on on your
For sure.
challenge?
Thank you. Right now, we're preparing for our next round. Like, it's always a good amount of prep. And this is both my ask and then also what I can help with. I've learned so much about fundraising. But anywho, for my specific ask, just like contacts to more investors, like early stage investors, is always fantastic. And then contacts to customers, I think, like the more, especially now, because every company that we speak to is very excited about what we're doing. It's just being able to reach, sustainability managers. They're always a great champion to start with. Sustainability managers in companies that are water intensive, or who have like water risk, I think would be
Mm.
really fantastic and always helpful. And then on the other side, I always help. I think in a good community, you always ask, but you also always return. If there's anyone who's interested in understanding the Latin American ecosystem, one, or two, fundraising. Like I have an amazing pair of coaches, that I think it would be. I've learned so much from them on all the aspect of fundraising, and all about how do you fundraise in a very systematic manner. And so I'm also happy to share those learnings with folks. Um, uh, the coaches are Quinn and Adam, and happy if anyone needs. I'm a big believer of having a coach while you fundraise, and being able to teach
Mm.
you. There's so many unwritten rules to fundraising that you think like, oh, I just have a great company and I'm an amazing founder, like it's just just go ahead and fundraise. But no, it's all about how do you create a authentic, like a process that creates a lot of FOMO. How do you, like, schedule calls that are back to back, so that it kind of time bounds it, so that it doesn't become longer and longer. And so if founders need that advice and learnings that were like very hard earned on how to do that fundraising process, that is like very tight. It's a lot of months of prep before you start asking for
Yeah.
introductions, way before, and you don't actually ask them. You're like, oh, thank you, you can introduce me to this person, but you only ask them when you realize, like, oh, I have this CRM of people, and I'm gonna list them back to back. And I realized there was a lot of unwritten rules. And so if anyone is like thinking of starting, or maybe they raised one round but they did it in a very casual manner, and they realize, like, wow, my next round, which is going to be more robust, I want to make sure that I raise in a very systematic manner. I'm always happy to hop on a phone and chat with founders who are about to go through this process and would like to do so in a more systematic manner.
Perfect. Thank you for answering the give and take in one.
Of course,
That was
happy
amazing.
to.
Thank you. And in the Wave Makers podcast, we also like to explore the human side of your
Mm.
leadership. And that means, is if you could share with us a personal or a professional kind of situation or challenge that really shaped you, and how did you how did you learn from it and move on? Yeah, so mainly it's kind of, what kind of advice would you share with other women building something right now?
Oh, for sure. That's a. I think I'll first start, because that was a multi-part question. I would say that the first one on, like, the human side of leadership, and I think I really encourage folks to have a philosophy of leadership, and what kind. And many times we think, like, okay, I need to solve this problem, and you're like, I need to get funding from VC, from investors, or perhaps you decide. I think the first thing I would say, make sure that you're intentional. Do you need funding from traditional investors or not. It could also be that you just bootstrap, and it's totally fine to do that. But more back to the philosophy of leadership, I think so much is about like what are the values that you want in your company, like what type, how do you want to show up to your team. I think I think what differentiates a company, I mean, there's many things, but I think the reason what inspires people that join your startup is that philosophy of leadership and the values that you create. And for me, it was really important to be able to set them. And literally, one of the first things that I did was I created a slide on the values of Celeste and the type of company that I wanted to create. And they've evolved through time. But having
Mm.
and co-creating with your team, if you already have a larger team, what is your mission, what is your vision, repeating it every, like literally in my Monday stand-up meetings, I repeat it and I tell the team, this is what we're building for. Like, this is, I know sometimes there's going to be ups and downs, but this is the reason what we're doing this. And also
Wait, do you hear
no
the plates in the background? Sorry.
sorry, no worries. Yes, let me ask them if I can also uh, let me just tell them for a second.
Yeah.
Sorry. So back to that philosophy of leadership. Sorry for that background
Yes,
noise.
don't worry.
I would say that again, being very authentic, like who are you as a person, and how do you want to
Mm.
show up as a leader? And I think many times I would say just to female founders, we're many times told to be like, you have to be very aggressive and you have to be very like hard. And I think something that I would say is I actually really love like what are female soft quality, like, and anyone can have these qualities, and I don't think that they're gendered, but I think sometimes what we consider like traditionally female qualities, like empathy and listening and kindness, I think those are actually make a really really strong leader. And
Mm.
sometimes you do have to be the set a vision and be very strong, and team, this is where we're going. And especially when there's a lot of uncertainty, you're like you have to be very strong and hard. But I actually find that like water, being flexible, adaptable,
Yeah. Yeah.
listening, actually sets a much stronger leadership. And being okay and being confident that you can lean on those qualities, that I'm not the loudest person in the team. I actually tell my team I always hire people that are smarter than me. And so I like to be the last person that speaks, because as a CEO, you have to understand that once you say something, people are like, okay, if my opinion was different, it doesn't encourage other people to speak. And so I'm like, hey, how we just came out of this call. What did you with this call with this customer? What did you see? What did you react? And what do you
Mm.
think? And I think
Yeah.
and being very human and empathetic is really important. Like if someone's having a tough time, like how do you show up for them, and how do you make sure that you create a company is a series of humans. It's sometimes it's important to not see them as just machines. And in the other side,
Yeah.
how do you, it's a bit of a balance, because you do that, but at the same time, as a young female founder, many times people will be like, oh, like she's really kind and nice, and so then we can just like step over her. And it's like, no, there's moments where you have to rise up and be like, I will not tolerate this. It's about commanding respect, but once you have it, then leaning on kindness. And so it's a bit of a balance. But once you gain people's respect, then is leaning into that kindness. But if someone
Mm.
not tolerating that, if you're a young woman and that you're kind, that you're just able to, that people can, they're like, oh, because you're not going to speak, it means that I can speak louder and trample over
Yeah.
you. And it's like, no. And it's a bit of a balance. And I think not going only on these traditionally masculine hard leadership qualities, but also leaning on the softer side, while being sure that you command that respect. And you also asked the question, like, so that's a big advice for women. Like, you can lean on some of the qualities that you might
Mm.
naturally have, or you could be any gender, and listening to this podcast, and maybe you lean a little more, you like to listen more. And I think that's a very strong form of leadership too. And there's very strong leaders, even outside of startups, that have that kind. And so I would encourage folks to find that what feels natural to you, and what are your strengths, and finding people in your team that complement you, that perhaps like I am
Yeah.
very like big picture, I am very like how do the systems connect. And for example, my COO Selena, she's a lot more like in the trees and a lot more execution focused, and we balance each other really really well. And then
Mm.
you'd also ask the answer of like personal things that have happened. I mean, so
Mm.
many things. I'm trying to think of a particular thing to share. I think the biggest thing is that life happens, and you have all these plans. It could be COVID, or it could be, that a family member gets sick. Like I had a family member, an aunt who got cancer while I was, in the startup, and you're like, sometimes you're feeling really sad and you're feeling really bad, and still being able to show up, because of that discipline, but still understand that you're human. I always think I did the best I could today, and it could be that I didn't close this deal or it didn't happen, but I think you have so much kindness with yourself. Like sometimes I think founders, we're so hard on ourselves because we try to keep a lot of control on things that we don't have control. And I think it's been, for me, reading a lot of Stoic philosophy, and learning how, what do I actually have control, the process but not the outcome, and having that discipline to continue showing up. And even there, but life happens and people around you are going to get sick, or you're going to get sick, and taking care of yourself and being kind to yourself as things perhaps don't happen, and seeing failure as a form of success. I have so many friends that, they're too afraid to try, both female and male friends, and I actually find that a little sadder than having tried it and failed. And so, I think there's a lot of stories there, but I think I would just say, have that network, have the discipline, be kind on yourself, and always say tomorrow I can try a little bit. I can try to be better. So if today it didn't work out, tomorrow I'm going to try to show up a little bit better. I if this, sales call didn't happen, I learn from it, and then in the next one I'm going to be better at it. And I think that growth mindset really helps, and that kindness, because if not, you would go crazy. And if you just lean on this aspect of perfection, you're never going to go anywhere, and you're going to be so afraid to even just start.
Mm. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Sorry,
That was very
there's a lot of things in one, but hopefully, sometimes
yes.
it's like you have stories that come in a
Combo.
lot of,
It's I love the combo. Thank you so much, Lenny.
of
And
course.
we're about to end, and to end, we would love to kind of bring forward and offer visibility to other female founders. Are there any female founders that do you think we should feature next, or do you want to cheer for them? And if
For
you
sure,
do,
there
why?
are happy to. And sorry, I got excited, and I jumped straight in. There's three founders, that I would like to highlight, three female founders. The first one is Antia Vasquez from Genia. So these are three, female founders based in Mexico City.
Mm,
Antia Vasquez, is in the ed tech space, and she's doing
yeah.
incredible work making sure that, there's around 70 million Mexicans that end in the informal economy. And so what she's trying to
Hmm.
do is build a platform that connects both. So if you're a person that's going through, and you're in college, that you make sure that you understand. Maybe you're a first generation, like your parents worked did not work in a large corporation, and you don't even know how to do an interview, and how do you even get these roles. And so a traditional LinkedIn wouldn't work for you. And so she
Yeah.
connects like, universities with large corporates, and also students, so that they do not end up in the informal economy. And she's fantastic, and has other
Mm,
founders that I would like to really highlight her. And the other two women are Lorena Ostos and Giovanna Abramo from Plena. They're doing incredible things in the femtech space,
mhm,
and basically they're creating spaces, and it's both physical spaces, but also, a digital platform that allows women to have a lot more access to, a female care, and to be able to understand, like, oh, if I'm going to go to the gynecologist, like, how does this work, and being able to have, holistic care, associated to women, and for example, hormones. And I'm not sure if they're already leaned already into menopause, but at least into younger populations, where sometimes like having, you know multiple just a multiple like a team, because as we know, many times
mhm,
medicine is actually quite male centric, not only in of course doctors, but also even just medicine itself. There's a lot of books and articles have been written that, you know, a lot of the symptoms that we think of, let's say of a heart attack, many times are thought of and studied in men more so than women. And so they're really leaning towards female care and understanding like what does that female first care look like. And so in the end of it, so it's Antia Vasquez from Genia, and also Lorena Ostos and Giovanna Abramo from Plena.
Fantastic. And in your world of water, is there anyone in the ecosystem, any female founders in the water world that you would like to also highlight?
That's a
Or
fantastic question. It's mostly a lot of male founders, but I'm
they're
trying
all
to
men.
think. I'm trying to think if there's anyone that would be good. Give me one second to
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure there is. Um, I mean, I'd like to highlight Amal, and she's in climate finance more so than water. Amal Ketata, she's a Tunisian a founder based in Mexico City. Just as a note, Mexico City has folks from all over the world, and it's become very
yeah,
cosmopolitan. But I think I would like to highlight Amal. But I'm trying to think specifically in water, female founders. I think I mostly know male founders, which is a bit sad, but I'm trying to think if there's any other female founders in water. Not that I can think of right
yeah,
now, but if not, I'm happy to send those
yeah.
after.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. And finally, looking onto the next generation, what kind of advice would you like to give young talent kind of
Hmm.
entering the industry? Mindset or things to or skills to consider to entering, or yeah, what do you think it matters the most?
For sure, I think we're living in an unprecedented time of change, and the first I guess I have some advice around AI. A lot of my family's in education, and I would say that so much of learning, and I've seen this as a founder, learning is effort. Learning
Mm,
requires effort, and many times something like different AI tools make it easy so that it's reduced effort, and they're amazing. Like I love it. I think if you use them in the right way, I always say that AI tools should help you with one logical step at a time. And so not to many times we say like, oh, develop this whole plan 10 steps ahead of, and you don't even understand, and it's such a bad plan because you it looks like someone just spit it out and they just copied something generic. But if you you know, co-create with a good AI tool, it's such a powerful outcome. At the end you learn so much, you're like, oh, that was so interesting, but actually, and then it'll spit out something, you're like, actually I don't like this, and you go guiding it. But if
mm,
ever I think the big thing is, how do we use and incorporate AI tools? The big thing is, don't let it do the thinking for you. Don't relinquish the decision making power, but use it as, give me the options, give me information, challenge it, go back and forth. And for me, I mean, I don't think I would have been able to be a solo founder in the age of no AI. But I
mm,
think whenever, you know, let's say ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, go ahead and you know, develop something that I don't agree. Like I wasn't embedded in this process. I actually say pause. Let's go back to the process where I you know, I understood and was in the same page as you. And I would say everything from learning, from if you're in class, if you're young talent, you're in college, like it's so easy for it to just be like, hey, write this essay for me. And of course it can
mm,
help you polish. But I really think I'm a big believer that education is effort. And so I would say some advice around there. In terms of skills, I think more and more we're realizing that, you know, those human elements of everything from problem solving. It's no longer about having the right information. It's about knowing like how, like, problem solving, and I think
mm,
creativity are huge,
mm.
and skills that, you know, it's like trying to think, what are aspects of my humanity that I think cannot be automated,
Yeah.
and leaning on those. And I think it's a tricky time to be like, what do I study? And I think it's just developing a mindset that we're going to have to evolve and change, and in just a couple years, you know, the workforce is going to change, and just being okay that you're not going to just go to school and then leave. I think it's going to be something where you're going to have to continuously be learning. And so I would say find people that you admire, find people, see their paths, and a lot of it is like they're very discontinuous paths, but a lot of it is, I have found that the people that are most successful are those that are big dreamers and have a lot of grit. It's not the smartest. I have friends who I would consider some of the smartest people that didn't have the dream or didn't have the grit to go for their dreams. And I think in this age of rapid change, a curiosity and appetite to continue learning, the grit to, the dream of where you're going and actually dream very, very big. I'm a big believer of like, let other people, like, don't tell yourself no. Like many times I heard people are like, why would you apply to Harvard? Like it's so hard, you're never going to get in. I'm like, I'm just going to apply. If I get in, amazing. If I don't,
Yeah.
then at least it's like my mom says, it's go get the no. Like at least you went out, you get it. And if you got it, you're like, okay, then it wasn't for me. But so many people,
Yeah.
like they tell themselves no. So I'd say like, go out there, dream. If you're ever applying to programs, like let them reject you. And if you said no, you're like, perfect. I learned something while I was doing it. And have the grit. Like I have friends that were just like, you know what, I want to be an engineer, even if perhaps like it's not my natural ability, and they would stay up really late finishing, all the assignments. And now they're really, really successful, because they just had the grit to even if things weren't easy, they're like, I'm going to go to office hours, I'm going to go talk to the
Yeah.
professors. And so it's a lot of feedback. I would just say how to use AI, and then also being a combination of creativity and always wanting to learn, grit and vision, I think is what actually makes folks the most successful, moving forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Do you have any other thing to add to the Wavemaker podcast?
I would just do a final note on water.
If
It
not,
is, read about it. The more you see it, you see everything from, the Panama Canal and how through droughts they were losing like $100 million per month. So it's everything from supply chains to water quality and what we're drinking to tensions. Like the Syrian civil war has been tied to changes in precipitation. The more you open your eyes to how water touches everything in our life, if I can just encourage people who are listening to this podcast, if I can if it just piqued your curiosity for a little bit, reading and seeing something in the news, and I think a lot of water crises will not be named. Sometimes we'll call them a water crisis. Sometimes it'll just be, political tensions, and they were fueled because of water scarcity. If I just want to leave folks that water is a fascinating problem, and I really encourage you to read a little bit more about it, and you'll probably fall in love, and it's helpful awareness, to have.
yeah, I love it. I love it. I will take your homework. I think I will read more about it. I think it's fun. I think it's fantastic. And I really, really appreciate your time and sharing with us all this fantastic journey. I'll see you soon, I hope, when I
Thank
go
you.
to Mexico.
Yes. Thank you so much. You have your
Um,
here, and just to say that, when you come back, you'll see that more and more of the entrepreneurial ecosystem and so much is happening
yeah,
in Mexico City. And also for listeners that, I think as a last note, many times you hear about Mexico, and you might hear like insecurity or like, border issues, and of course those are things, but there are, 120 million people that have fascinating stories. And I think the innovation ecosystem is really growing in Mexico because of how close we are to the states. And so
yeah,
just as a small note to listeners, that, there's so much happening,
yeah,
and, it's easy to just see the news and see one side of a country when there's so much more.
yeah, totally agree. Thank you so much. And to everybody listening, thank you so much for joining us and see you in the next Wave Making podcast. Thank you,
Thank you.
Lenny.
Thank you, Sol. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
Voy a apretar el stop